Okay, let me go back here. So I'm Renee Schmidt. I'm the grassland specialist for Buffalo Nations Grassland Alliance, and we have a webinar today where we are discussing our grassland restoration request for proposals webinar. And I'm going to, I'm thinking of muting my video just so I'm not distracting you. So this webinar is being recorded. I just started it a couple minutes ago, and the recording will be available on the Bingo website and the Facebook page. And upon request, at this point, the audience is muted in terms of sound and video. But if you have any questions at any point during the webinar, please enter them in the chat, and we will discuss your questions at the end after the presentation during our question and answer session. And the chat shouldn't be visible to in the video, so your anonymity will be protected when we post this on online. There will be an RFP reminder sent in a few weeks, and I will include a link to the recording and a frequently asked information sheet. And speaking of which, that frequently asked questions sheet will be updated with your questions today and will also be available with the recording on our website and Facebook page. Before I start talking about the grassland restoration funding, I wanted to mention two other upcoming funding opportunities. First is a tribal lands leasing grant that will be available to tribes and their tribal programs, such as wildlife programs, fish and game programs. And the intent is to help these programs lease tribal lands that they have identified as being important for their conservation plans. We hope to announce that opportunity next month. The other opportunity is connected to the Natural Resource Conservation Services Regional Conservation Partnership Program, or RCPP. We Binga got or is a partner and will be promoting an RCPP program specifically for tribal lands. So any producer or tribal program that is leasing tribal lands can participate in this program and get funds to convert marginal cropland to native grasslands, get yearly payments for compensation for taking land out of production while it's reestablishing as grasslands, and can even be eligible to apply for EQIP funding for infrastructure. And sorry, just a second. I have two screens going on here. If you want any information about Binga's upcoming programs, current programs, and funding, you can visit our website or follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a monthly newsletter, and you can request to receive emails of that newsletter by visiting our Contact Us page on our website. So I wanted to do a brief introduction of Binga for those of you who have never interacted with us before, as well as our staff. So um, to begin with, I'm Renee Schmidt. I'm the grassland specialist and enrolled member of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. And if you have any questions about your proposal, um, please feel free to email me. Next is Jessie DeMontenay. You may have heard her talking at the beginning before we started recording. She's our grants manager and enrolled member of the Fort Belknap tribe in Montana. And she's the person to whom you would send your completed proposal on or before June 23rd. Next, who is joining us in the audience is Sunshine Claymore. She's our youth engagement specialist, and she's also enrolled in Standing Rock. Um, Next is Sean Grassel. He's not with us today, but he's our CEO and an enrolled member of the Lower Brule Sioux Tribe. Libby Klumalo has joined us, and I think I should probably unmute her. So if she wants to assist with answering questions, she can, but she's um, an employee of the World Wildlife Fund, and she serves as our technical advisor. Tony Morissette isn't with us today either, but he is enrolled in Rocky Boys Tribe, and he's our land conservation officer. And then finally, Tara Walks is here, and she's a member of the Crow Nation and our outreach coordinator. So I will keep going. So for those of you, so most of you have maybe looked at our website, read the RFP, or have worked with Bingo before, and you would know that we are a Native-led nonprofit that supports 16 Native nations in the Northern Great Plains with the goals of helping with capacity building, wildlife conservation, grassland restoration, and creating sustainable nature-based economies. And we also like to assist when we can to support these Native nations through sustainable financing strategies. This is a map of the Northern Great Plains, and this is an ecoregion that includes mixed grass and short grass prairies and the transition zone between the short grass and the shrub steppe. And all of the tribes that are within the Northern Great Plains are welcome to join our alliance and work with us and collaborate on projects and whatnot. So again, if you looked at our RFP, you probably read about our purpose, which includes assisting these Native nations with technical and financial resources, and also helping to ensure these three things that I'm not going to read out loud. But if you are preparing a proposal for this grant, I would suggest looking back at these this slide or this area in the RFP to help you guide your proposal writing. So speaking of the proposal, this grant opportunity has two funding categories. The first is grassland restoration. This funding category is open to tribes and their tribal programs, as well as Native-led nonprofits. The second category is staff support, and that is again open just to tribes and their tribal programs. And just to let you know, any tribes can apply for one or both of these categories. There are a couple criteria that grant applicants need to meet to be eligible for funding. The first one is that any tribal programs or Native-led nonprofits must represent one or more of the 16 Native nations in the Northern Great Plains, and these are listed here. These are the same tribes that were in the map in the previous slide. Another grantee eligibility requirement pertains to Native-led nonprofit organizations. The first one we already covered. It's also expected that the nonprofit has leadership where over 50% are members of a federally recognized tribe. The nonprofit should have 501(c)(3) status or 501(c)(3). I said it right. 501(c)(3) status with the IRS and should be registered with their state as a nonprofit and be in good standing. And I just want to note that if you're a nonprofit that is applying for the grassland restoration funding, please be prepared to provide documentation to verify your tax status and whatnot. As far as project eligibility, there's one main requirement that's shared with both funding categories, and that is the location. Um, any proposed projects are expected or required to be on tribal or individual trust land, either on or off the reservation, or it should be fee simple land held by the tribe, either on or off the reservation. So I'm going to go into some specifics about each funding category, starting with the grassland restoration funding. Again, the eligible entities include both tribal programs and Native-led nonprofit organizations. The maximum funding request is $50,000. So if you have a very large project in mind, this might not be the best option, or maybe if you could break the project down into smaller components, maybe you can fund it with $50,000. But we also will be considering projects that are much less than that. For the grassland restoration funding, we expect your project to meet one or more of these three goals, to increase wildlife habitat, reduce fragmentation, or increase connectivity, and or increase native plant species that are important to the tribal community, and or build stronger connections between the tribal communities and their natural resources. So again, your project should meet one or more of these goals, either directly or indirectly. So again, if you have looked at the RFP, you may recognize these examples. All I did was copy and paste them into this slide. Um, we developed some examples that we hoped capture the diversity of projects that we might be able to fund. And if you look at some of these, you'll see some of them potentially could be small, like a pollinator garden or a restoration plot where you focus on a few species of native plants that will be seed sources for future restorations. Those could potentially be small in acreage in terms of like 20 to 30 acres. And some of the other projects, like restoring habitat for wildlife, may be much larger, a couple hundred acres. Did I say that right? A couple hundred, yes. So we we are open to a diversity of project ideas as long as they do meet one or more of these goals. The maximum duration of funding or the maximum duration of the project should be 24 months. And for restoration projects, that may not be a long amount of time. So what we're doing is we're hoping to help programs and organizations establish a project that they will be able to work on in the long term. And what I've listed here are some examples of things that you might be able to accomplish in 24 months. And this is a fairly short list, but there can be things that could be done like site preparation, um, deciding what seed mix to use and where to purchase it. If you could do seed collection, you could plant. There's some native species that do very well as transplants, so you could start some in a greenhouse. Um, a lot of maintenance of a restoration site is required, especially in the establishment stage. You could plant or plan community outreach events, educational events, etc. So this is a short list of things that could be accomplished in 24 months as you try to achieve your overall goal of restoring a prairie. So next, I'm going to focus on staff support. And again, the eligible entities that can apply for this are the tribal programs that represent a tribe in our region. And again, the maximum funding request amount is $50,000. And the funds should be used to supplement the salaries of existing or new staff who will work on grassland habitat restoration. Any proposed projects uh, should have one or more of these goals, increasing staff knowledge or building staff capacity. As far as staff capacity, that can be actually using this money to help hire someone who's going to work on restoration or using the funds to allow a current staff member to allocate a certain number of hours to restoration planning. The maximum project duration is 24 months, and I listed a short list of tasks that a funded employee could do if their main goal was to develop and plan a restoration project. It could include just developing and planning or the actual planting and implementation of the restoration. If you plan for this person to do community involvement, you could assign several tasks related to that. So it's really up to you, the person who's applying for this funding, to decide what this individual would need to do in with their time for which the staff support is paying for. All right, so what I'm going to talk about next is the proposal itself as far as the components that are needed in it. And there's four main sections of your proposal that we would like you to include. And I guess I put it here that when you are done with your proposal, you can email it as a Word document or PDF. The first requirement of your proposal is the executive summary, and this only has to be at 1,000 words or less, and it's only a brief description of your project's goals, objectives, expected outcomes. You can describe briefly how your project goals fit in with the funding category goals or the overall grant goals. But it should be short and a summary. And usually people write their summary after they write their longer project description. Oops. Oh, sorry. I was looking at the chat. Was just checking to see if someone needed to be allowed in. So as far as the second component of your proposal should be your project description. And this is where you go into detailed explanation of your project and go into detail about your goals, objectives, and outcomes, how this aligns with the goals of the funding category and the overall grant. And you also want to include a section in your description on how your project will impact the tribal community. This should be 3,000 words or less. We don't have a page requirement on this, so if you want to include headers or have really big margins or small margins, that's okay. We're not worried about font size or anything like that. We're more worried about the word number and the content. The third part of your proposal should be the budget. This should only be one page maximum, and this is a time for you to provide details about all of the expenses you anticipate you need paid for your project, and write a brief narrative or description of as to why you need that particular expense. As far as the breakdown of expenses, we provided some examples, and these examples may not pertain to your particular project, but it's just an example. And oops, I apologize there. If you if you are applying for staff support, for example, you would definitely need to have a line item for personnel salary and fringe benefits. And I would suggest no matter if you are applying for one or both of the categories that you talk to the HR department or someone in your program that oversees grants. I know that some nonprofits and many tribal programs are required to get approval from um, those in charge. So make sure you have good discussions with who you're supposed to make sure that your budget is correct. And then the final component of your proposal is the timeline. And this is where you have the opportunity to do some planning for yourself and then also show us that you have thought through the feasibility of your project and what you can accomplish in 24 months. I would suggest writing out kind of like a schedule of major milestones that you will achieve every few months up until the end of the 24-month funding period. And then think about your outcomes and what you want to achieve, and then when you would when you would achieve those outcomes or deliverables. This only has to be one page, and as with the budget, both the budget and timeline, you could do in column format or write it out however you wish, but just one page is needed for each. So for those of you that submit a proposal, you may want to know how how your proposal will be evaluated. It's heavily weighted towards project design, implementation, and alignment with the the grant program goals. We do also base part of your score on the budget and your financial feasibility. All information and documents received during the proposal application process are held in confidence and will become part of the records of Binga. And at the end of the evaluation period, all applicants will be notified of the outcome of the evaluation process as to whether or not they will receive funding. Okay, so it's always good to read what the restrictions and requirements are of a grant, especially before you decide to accept funds. But it's good to look at when you're applying too. First, we do want verification of your nonprofit status if you are a nonprofit organization. We do expect that the funds are used for what you described in your budget. So don't use it to buy, I don't know, a new vehicle, maybe. Anyway, just stick to your budget. And as far as reporting requirements, if you are awarded a grant, Jesse DeMontenay will give you directions on when and what to report as far as progress reports and final reports. And just to let you know, your timeline that you included in your proposal will be used as a guide for your progress and final reports. As far as procurement, contracts, and compliance, these are really related to, well, we expect you to follow the policies of your program or organization. That includes getting permission to even apply for the grant. And then we also expect you to follow any tribal, local, state, or federal regulations and restrictions. So we have kind of a general proposal timeline, and we hope to have more specifics as we like get our evaluation team together and whatnot. The most important date on here is the due date for your proposal, which is 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on Monday, June 23rd of this year. As to when you will get a status notification, we're hoping that we'll be able to get back to all applicants by the end of August. And this really just depends on who the evaluators will be and how quickly they can organize and review the proposals. As far as the distribution of funds to those that are grantees, we would like to start distribution in fall of 2025. So you are free to contact anyone in Binga about anything, I guess. But as far as this proposal, if you have any questions, you can direct those to me. My email is listed here. It's also in the RFP and on the website. When that big day arrives and you're ready to submit your proposal, you can send that to Jessie DeMontney, either in Word or PDF format. And again, her email is listed there and in the RFP. So I want to thank everyone who joined today. And if you haven't put any questions yet in the chat, you still do so. We'll start addressing those questions now. And I don't know if anybody in the Bingham team wants to volunteer as the moderator. Otherwise, I guess I can read them and help answer those questions. And as far as the Bingham team, I'm going to make sure that everybody has the option of unmuting themselves if they wish to. Okay. All right. No volunteers for. I'm going to stop. I'm
I
going
can
to.
help moderate
Okay.
questions, Renee. I was waiting to be unmuted. I kept trying to click the button and it
Oh,
kept denying me.
sorry.
So I noticed there were a couple questions in the chat, and I was kind of taking note as you went along. And one of the first questions that came up was, is indirect cost and sustainability allowable to include in the budget? Indirect cost, yes. But to the question about sustainability, I would suggest that you email a little bit more information about what you mean by sustainability to Renee, and then we will get back to you via email. Um, let's see. The other question was, do you need a tribal council resolution with the proposal? Um, and Renee, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that there is a need for a tribal council resolution with their proposals.
Right, but that does depend on your tribe's policies.
Yes.
So, yeah, we don't require it, but you would have to ask what your tribe's policies are.
There's also a question in the chat about could a project start date be in 2026?
Um, I guess it would depend on the exact task, but yes, it could. And as long as your timeline reflects that you will be done um, with the funded portion of your project within 24 months, and that is actually a good question. I think 24 months does start this fall, but that's something I guess we'll come back. We'll verify that. Um, because there are some we're doing a sub grant here, and so we do need to look back at the grant that is funding this sub award that we're sharing with you. And so we'll double check on when we need to have the money spent. And yes, you could potentially start this spring, but it may have an effect on how much you can accomplish by the time this funding or the funding is supposed to be or the project's supposed to be done. So we'll get back to you with the specifics on that.
Okay, and then there's another question, and it says a tribal landowner asked if this qualifies to reseed cropland to hayland.
As far as hayland, it as long as it's native grasses and other native plants, yes. I mean, if the goal is to use it for hay, that's fine. Um, it's just that it needs to be native plants. So no, like, as I guess the USDA refers to them as tame species like brome and intermediate wheatgrass. Those we would not want you to plant. It would have to be a native mix of grasses.
Okay, let's see. There's another question that says, if our research has indicated we need to change our management of our bison herd and plants due to land being degraded due to the 5 years of drought, could this grant pay for a professionally developed 5-year range management plan to pay for our consultant?
To pay for the consultant, that is a good question. I think that's when again we'll probably have to get back to the individual that asked, and then actually a good question to include in our information sheet. We did have a brief discussion about that um, as to whether a consultant could be hired if the goal is to do grassland restoration. We'll get back to you with an answer, and then one of the things that we've been telling people is go ahead and submit a proposal and it we'll see. But I think we should address that question directly as far as whether or not a consultant can be paid for with the staff support. Assuming the staff support is what you're thinking of.
And Renee, if you
Yeah.
wouldn't mind putting back up your slide that shows your email address, and
Oh,
then I would suggest that the person who asked that question, if you could please email that question to Renee, and then we will get back to you on that through those channels.
okay. Let me see if I can do it. I don't know what I'm sharing.
I think you're just your second to the last slide.
Is it visible?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, thanks.
So there is a follow-up to that question about hayland, and it says, if the purpose of the hayland in native grass is primarily for livestock, does it qualify?
It can. It because we do recognize that livestock grazing is important for making sure that grasslands stay grassland and they're not converted to some other purpose. Um, so if and on top of it, grazing and haying or mowing are also important disturbances for grasslands. So we wouldn't say no, just as long as if it's a nonprofit or native program that's applying for this funding. And if your ultimate goal is to improve a pasture so that it can be used in the future for grazing and haying, yes, that'd be fine.
All right. Um, I'm not seeing any new questions come into the chat. There was a person who was also interested in that 20, or if a project could start in 2026. So I would just again recommend that you see Renee's email address on the screen, and I suggest that you um, send any question that isn't completely answered in this webinar today to Renee's email, and we will get back to you on that. But yeah, I'm not seeing any new questions, Renee.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any questions from our current audience, then, oh, is there one?
Nope, just the
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Oops, with that. Um, So with that, if we don't have any more questions during this webinar, we can end it. And actually, I'll just say goodbye for the webinar recording purposes. And so I'll end that right now.